entrepreneurs. I wanted to take a little time here today and talk about how much should you be paid. Because a lot of times teachers are in the dark about how much should I be earning for a yoga class, a yoga private, how much should I be charging, and like what really is the deal on that, and why do different studios pay different rates. So I wanted to shed a little light on that. So first of all, one of the things that can be confusing as a yoga teacher is that we walk into the studio that we work at and we look around and say we're lucky enough to have a prime time class, a class at 6 p.m., something like that. We go in, we see 30 students, if it happens to be a rockin' studio, and we think each of these students is paying $22 to drop in. That's like $600. Why am I getting paid 50? And here's why. And I totally understand why yoga teachers are wondering about this. It's because we don't see all of the back end that goes into the true cost of running a studio. So I've worked at some studios behind the scenes, several of them. And so let me just share with you, first of all, that we want to keep the context of the studio in mind. So like, for example, what we don't get to see is that there's a 6 a.m. class that has 4 people in it, and we're also paying the teacher $50 a class. We don't see that these students, half of them, more than half of them who come in, maybe they're on memberships, so they're not paying $20 a class, they're paying like $13 a class. Or maybe all these people that come in, they're doing a special, or they're on Groupon, or whatever offer the studio is trying to run. So the actual cost per head, what the studio is making per student, is not as high as you would think. On top of that, you got to think about the studio's rent, their facilities costs, the cost of any staff that they have, the cost of all the props that they use, heating costs, showers, towels, all that, if they offer that kind of stuff. So the cost that it takes to run a studio is actually really high. In my experience, there are very few studios out there that are just killing it. So I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of that larger business context first. And that isn't to say that as yoga teachers, we don't deserve to make a great wage. We totally do. But I just want you to have a little behind the scenes sneak peek at what running a studio is like if you're not already familiar with it. So let's get down to brass tacks. Wages. All right, so when you're first starting off as a yoga teacher, honestly, me, for the first year that I taught after my 200-hour, I was teaching for free. I taught volunteer classes because I just really needed to get experience. And now that there's so many yoga teachers out there, it's more important than ever to refine your skills, refine, and practice once you graduate. So we have to let go of the idea that we're going to be entitled to a job immediately after our 200-hour. It usually takes a little bit more practice than that. But what you can do immediately is go work at places like community centers or volunteer times, just to get a little bit more of that experience and feel really comfortable with what you have to offer with your teaching skills. So usually coming out of a teacher training, and again, you guys, this is market dependent, so it's going to depend on where you are and what kind of studio you're teaching at. But most of the time, I'd say you're looking at $30-$40 maybe. Now, different studios will pay you different ways. Some of them are going to pay you based on just flat rate. Here, you get $40, that's it. Some of them will give you a price per head. So smaller studios might tend to do something like that. And some studios will split with you. That's rare, I got to tell you. Most studios don't like to split revenue for classes because then they never know how much their payroll is going to be out to the teachers. But some by donation studios, for example, do it that way. And that can either be a pro or a con. Let me tell you a story. So when I was starting out, there was a by donation studio, and I went and taught there when this by donation studio was just starting. And so I'd basically get like $5 a student or something. And that's amazing if you have, if you've got like 60 students, 560, 300. Oh, wow, that's awesome, right? But it's not great if you have 2 students, right? And so it was just starting off, so I earned no money, and there were days where nobody came. But if you are teaching in a prime time spot at a place like that is established, then that can be a really great way to get above the glass ceiling of studio costs. So most of the time, studios are only going to pay you somewhere between, let's say, $30 per class, and at the very highest end, I'm going to say in like big urban centers, maybe you'd get 80. maybe 80, maybe 90. And that's like a senior teacher who's teaching at a studio that has a little bit, like has the revenue and has the number of students to support those kind of wages. In general, my experience is that you're going to be looking in the 40 range to 60 range is kind of like as a yoga teacher. So that said, privates and things like that, usually you can make your own rates. Like I'd say anywhere between $60 for an hour to, $120 an hour if you're more experienced. Corporate yoga, if you're working at a place that's got a lot of money in its back pocket, that's where you can start to earn some real bang for your buck for an hourly. Like some corporate places, you could say I charge $225 an hour. If you're working at Apple or Facebook, my friends, then charge appropriately. But you have to know the business that you're working at. All right, so that's kind of the lay of the land of pay raises from my experience. I hope that's helpful and just gives you a little bit more know-how and a little bit more power. Now, I do want to say sometimes it's really hard to have the conversations about raises. Studios will often not have a system for giving you a raise or an increase in your pay rate. So you have to initiate that conversation, my friends. So it's really nice to plant seeds. You say something like, hey, I've been here for 6 months. At my year mark, I'd love to have a discussion. So start to plant the seeds early that you're looking to increase your rates. Do things that make you more attractive to the studio. So if you're going to other teachers' classes, if you're building community, if you're really promoting your classes and getting more people in the door, all those things are going to make it easier for you to ask for a pay rate bump and to have a real viable conversation about that. And if you have a hard time having those conversations, I'm going to put a link here to a blog that was written by a great friend of mine and coach about how to have difficult conversations. I always have the worst time having hard conversations about money. It feels really hard to ask for what we're worth and to ask for wage increases. So I found her advice, Christine's advice, so super helpful. So maybe it'll help you out too. All right, that's it, my yoga entrepreneurs. If you have questions, put them in the comments. I'd love to hear from you and hear how your experience is going.